The first thing you should know about me is this. I used to be terrified of silence, not the peaceful kind. The kind that comes after everyone leaves, when the house settles, and the walls seem to lean inward. Listening, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own thoughts, your own aloneness. Now, I sit at my kitchen table in the soft glow of a single lamp, the clock ticking steadily on the wall, and the silence feels different, gentle. I'm 30 years old. I live alone in a small house in Oregon, the kind with creaky wooden floors, and a porch that catches the afternoon sun just right. Tonight, rain taps lightly against the windows. There's a mug of tea warming my hands. No phone buzzing. No television murmuring in the background. Just me. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel lonely. That wasn't always true. If you had asked me 5 years ago who I was, I would have told you I was someone's girlfriend, someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's coworker. I defined myself by proximity, by who I was attached to, who needed me, who wanted me around. Being alone felt like failure. I grew up in a house that was never quiet. My parents divorced when I was young, and I learned early that noise meant safety. Voices meant presence. If people were around, everything was okay. So I filled my life with people, friends on every weekend, relationships that overlapped like chapters I never finished reading. Background noise everywhere, music, podcasts, TV shows playing just so I wouldn't hear myself think. I moved out at 18, chasing independence, but I carried my fear with me, like an invisible suitcase. Every apartment I lived in felt temporary, unless someone else's shoes were by the door. I told myself I was social, outgoing, easygoing. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. I didn't know how to be alone. At 24, I married a man who felt like certainty. Or maybe I needed him to feel that way. We met quickly, moved quickly, built a life that looked solid from the outside. We hosted dinners, took trips, posted smiling photos. But inside the marriage, I was still afraid of quiet. We talked constantly, not deeply, but endlessly, filling space, avoiding pauses. If he went out with friends, I felt restless. If he worked late, I felt uneasy. If I had a night to myself, I filled it with plans or distractions. I didn't know how to sit with myself. When the marriage ended, softly, painfully, without betrayal or drama, I told everyone I was fine. I wasn't. The house emptied slowly. His things disappeared. The echo grew louder. Friends checked in at first, then less often. Life moved on as it always does. And suddenly, I was alone in a way I had never been before. Not just single, unattached. No one to check in with before making decisions. No one to fill the evenings. No one to absorb the quiet. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I replayed conversations, questioned choices, wondered what it said about me that I was 30 and alone. I cried, not always because I missed him, but because I didn't recognize myself without someone else around. Loneliness isn't always about lacking people. Sometimes it's about not knowing who you are when no one is watching. I tried to fix it the way I always had. I dated again. I filled my calendar. I said yes to everything. Brunches, group hikes, late-night calls, anything to avoid going home to the quiet. But something had shifted. The distractions didn't work like they used to. I would come home exhausted, not from the events themselves, but from pretending I was okay with never being still. I noticed how often I checked my phone just to feel connected to something, how anxious I felt when there were no notifications waiting. One evening, after canceling plans for the third time in a week, I sat on the floor of my living room and admitted something out loud. I don't know how to be alone. The words surprised me with their honesty, and instead of pushing them away, I let them stay. That night marked the beginning of something uncomfortable and necessary. I stopped running from my evenings. I cooked dinner without music playing. I sat at the table instead of eating on the couch. I went on walks without headphones. At first, it felt unbearable, like standing in front of a mirror too long. My thoughts were loud, critical, sad. I realized how much of my identity had been built around being wanted, needed, chosen. Without that, who was I? Some nights, the loneliness hit hard. I cried, I questioned, I doubted my choices. I worried I had missed my chance at happiness. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something else began to emerge beneath the discomfort. Curiosity. I started journaling, not with goals or affirmations, but with questions. What do I actually enjoy? What makes me feel calm? Who am I when no one expects anything from me? The answers didn't come all at once. But they came. I learned I like mornings more than nights, that I think best when I'm walking, that I feel grounded when I cook slowly, that I don't actually enjoy constant conversation. I enjoy meaningful connection. I learned that silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it means space. I began setting boundaries, not just with others, but with myself. I stopped saying yes out of fear. I stopped filling every moment. I let weekends unfold without plans. There were still hard days. Loneliness doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't leave dramatically. It fades gradually, replaced by familiarity with your own presence. I started to notice how my body relaxed when I wasn't performing, how my thoughts slowed when I wasn't bracing for abandonment, how peaceful it felt to make choices based on what I needed, not what would keep someone else close. One afternoon, I sat on my porch watching the light change, and it hit me. I wasn't lonely in that moment. I was alone and okay. That realization didn't come with fireworks or certainty. It came quietly, like a truth you recognize rather than discover. I was learning something I had avoided my entire life: how to keep myself company. Learning how to be alone did not mean the absence of pain. That's something people don't talk about enough. There's this idea that once you choose solitude, once you decide to work on yourself, everything becomes calm and enlightened. But real growth doesn't arrive wrapped in peace. It arrives wrapped in honesty, and honesty can ache. There were nights when the house felt too big, when the sound of rain outside reminded me of all the evenings I used to fill with voices and laughter. There were mornings when I woke up reaching for my phone, instinctively expecting a message that wasn't there. On those days, the loneliness would whisper again. See, you're alone. See, no one needs you right now. See, this isn't what you planned. And instead of silencing that voice, I started doing something new. I listened, not to believe it, but to understand where it came from. Loneliness, I realized, was not my enemy. It was a messenger. It was pointing to old wounds I had never sat with long enough to heal. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to be honest. Week after week, I spoke about my fear of being forgotten, my need to be chosen, my habit of shrinking myself to fit into relationships. I learned how often I had confused attention with love, how I had stayed in situations that didn't nourish me simply because they kept me from being alone. The hardest realization was this: I had abandoned myself long before anyone else ever did. That truth hurt, but it also freed me. Slowly, my days began to change shape. I built routines that were mine alone: morning walks with no destination, grocery shopping without rushing, evenings where I cooked meals just because I liked the process, not because anyone was coming over. I stopped waiting for my life to begin when someone else entered it. I began living it as it was. There was one particular Sunday afternoon that stays with me. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that usually made me restless. I sat on the couch with a blanket, a book resting unopened in my lap, and I felt content. Not excited, not distracted, just present. It startled me. I realized then that peace doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. I still saw friends. I still dated occasionally, but something was different now. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or rescue me from myself. I was curious, open, but not desperate. When dates didn't work out, I didn't spiral. When plans fell through, I didn't panic. I had somewhere safe to return to: my own company. Over time, my home stopped feeling like a place I escaped to and started feeling like a place I belonged. I painted the walls a warmer color, rearranged the furniture, hung photographs that meant something to me, not just images that looked good. I made space, physically and emotionally, for who I was becoming. Friends noticed the change. "You seem calmer," one of them said over coffee. "Grounded," another added. I smiled, because what they couldn't see was how much work it had taken to get there. There were still moments of doubt. Birthdays, when the phone was quieter than I expected. Holidays that reminded me of old traditions. Weddings where I sat alone and wondered if this was it. But the difference was this: those moments no longer defined me. I learned that being alone is not the same as being unloved. That solitude can be rich, nourishing, full, if you stop treating it like a punishment. I stopped measuring my worth by my relationship status, stopped asking timelines questions they couldn't answer, stopped comparing my path to someone else's highlight reel. Instead, I asked myself one simple question: am I at peace right now? And more often than not, the answer was yes. One evening, almost a year after my divorce, I found myself sitting at the same kitchen table where this story began. The lamp was on, the house was quiet. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. I noticed how different my body felt. Relaxed, unclenched. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't missing anyone. I wasn't trying to distract myself from the silence. I was simply there, and I understood something that would have terrified my younger self. Being alone is not something you survive. It's something you can grow into. At 30, I no longer fear the empty spaces in my life. I fill them with intention, not noise. I allow myself to feel longing without letting it turn into desperation. I trust myself to know when I want connection and when I need rest. I know now that loneliness doesn't disappear when someone walks into your life. It disappears when you stop abandoning yourself. If someone joins my life in the future, it will be because they add to it, not because they save me from it. And if they don't, that's okay too, because I have learned how to sit at my own table, listen to my own thoughts, and hold my own heart gently. Tonight the rain has stopped. The house is still, the clock ticks on, and I am not lonely. I am home.